Our next lawyer has a different way of representing plaintiffs. One is he takes on government abuse and uses the tort system against abusive government officials and police abuses out of Portland, Oregon. And he's got a little firm, 3 lawyers or so, and he is the principal accountability factor for whenever the Portland, Oregon police get out of line, push people around, even abuse their own conscientious police to shut them up. That takes a lot of courage. You know, when you live in a city where you sue bad policing. But that's not just what Greg Kafoury does. He publicizes it. He sees his cases as instruments of public education. He searches out the media. He gives them the facts. He said, you make it up. You make your decision as to whether it's newsworthiness, but I'm not going to hide these facts in a court of law and in some depositions, so on. We want people to know, apropos that little ditty I read from Learned Hand, that no court nor law will save our sense of justice and liberties unless the people absorb it and become the bulwark. Greg graduated from Hastings Law School in San Francisco, and I remember when I went to speak there, this young law student came up with extraordinary vigor, and I knew that something was going to come of him, and indeed it has. He's helped us on a number of areas. He's always ready to communicate to the senators and representatives from Oregon, and even more, he's willing to volunteer his time without any recompense for any civic cause, and he's known that way in the city of Portland. I give you Greg Kafoury. Thank you.
Thank you, Ralph. I once saw a young female reporter put a microphone in Ralph's face and say, Mr. Nader, you struggle so hard for so many years, and your enemies are so powerful, victories are so difficult to come by. She said, how do you keep it up? And he looked at her for a long time, and finally he said, I'm not into mood swings. I hung up a shingle with a friend 40 years ago, and at the time, we could sign up for paid legal work representing indigents. We did misdemeanors, felonies, traffic tickets, termination of parental rights, mental commitments, representing people about to be held against their will, the most interesting cases I ever saw, juvenile court and so on. We were paid a relative pittance. We did our own typing. But after 6 months, we were able to take home $400 each, and our practice survived. Today, we have a vast number of lawyers who cannot find work. One of the reasons that they are driven to alternate employment or driven to selling their selves to corporate firms is because this kind of work has dried up around the country. In the 1970s, they created what they thought was a reform where they'd have specialized firms take care of each of these kinds of areas. The problem, of course, is when we would represent somebody who was charged with drunk driving or somebody whose kid was in trouble with the law, we'd give them our business card, and later, when they were being pushed around by a bank or an insurance company or a landlord, they could say, hey, I've got a lawyer. I got somebody I can call. Made them a person of honor. They had somebody with them. They had some power behind them. Those days are largely gone, and that, to the lawyers in the audience and the civilians, that's something from around the country we need to look at. We need to provide space. We need to find employment for the lawyers, not just for the lawyers so that we have people who can be independent, who can be, as Ralph calls, primary human beings, but so that the people who are poor, who need indigent help at some time or other in their lives, can have a lawyer's card in their pocket so they can't be so readily pushed around. It's tough out there. It took me 17 years to win a case that I could call my parents and tell them about. A couple of cases that illustrate what can be done. Bruce Perry used to walk the sidewalks and walkways on the docks in Honolulu, and the other longshoremen, big men, tough men, would step aside because he was not only the toughest guy in the docks, but his father was called by the newspapers the godfather of Hawaii. Perry had a group of guys. They exercised together, they worked out together, they ran the streets in martial form together, chanting together. They were scary guys, and they were all longshoremen. And when Rocky Tahara blew the whistle on Perry, because Perry would show up for work, sign in, and leave, it was called running away. The union was controlled by members of the Hawaiian underworld, and they didn't work. They would show up, run away, and the other guys would have to bear the burden. Well, when Perry got wind that he'd been exposed by Tahara, he confronted Tahara at the shift when hundreds of longshoremen were leaving, hundreds of other longshoremen going through the gate, in a scene right out of the great Marlon Brando movie on the waterfront. Perry attacked him, beat him savagely, kicked in his ribs, fractured his skull, lost an eye, nearly died. Perry was charged with attempted murder. There were 2 trials, while Rocky recuperated in Utah in the witness protection program. There were 2 trials. Each time, one very suspect juror, would not vote for conviction, and Perry walked away. The lawyers in Hawaii expressed an interest in this case, but they'd get interested, then they'd get real quickly disinterested. A friend of my beloved partner, Mark McDougall, called Mark and said, "Can you guys help?" So we flew to Hawaii, and we represented Rocky. We sued the union, we sued the employers because they were all in on this system. The judicial system was not a marvel over there, and we wound up going to trial only against Bruce Perry. We won some millions of dollars, never collected it, but because he did not wish to be garnished, it drove Perry from the docks. And Rocky went back to work, and the guys who supported him now came out of the woodwork. It was a beautiful thing, and the Oregonian said Greg Kafoury and Mark McDougall have helped overturn a corrupt system in Honolulu's waterfront. But the truth of the story, of course, was that the hero was Rocky. When Jonah Johansson was 18 months old, he followed his mother into the bedroom where his little brother was sick with respiratory illness, and he saw the vaporizer on the floor blowing hot steam. The instructions said, "Put it on the floor." And before his mother noticed, he went over, attracted by the steam, and put his hands on it. An adult can get their hands away fast. A toddler, their brain doesn't work fast enough, their muscles don't work fast enough, and he suffered grievous third-degree burns to both hands. The mother called the company, and the company said, "Well, we'll talk to our insurance company," and she did. And she learned 2 things. One was that they'd never been sued. And the second thing, despite they've been burning people for 80 years, turning out 80% of the vaporizers in America, marketed by the Vicks company. And the second thing is they learned why, because the insurance person said to him, "Well, you know, ma'am, the only time we've seen injuries this serious is when the parents take the child's hands and hold it against the steam." She came to us, and we sued. Our engineer had lunch with us, and he took out a napkin, and he said, The steam comes out at 212 degrees. It burns you in nothing flat. But here are 3 designs, and he just sketched them out, just as simply as that. He said, to lower the temperature drastically. And when we got to trial, we learned that in the threat of enormous punitive damages, which we'd requested, they changed the design. After all those years, they changed the design, and now the steam was coming out 60 degrees cooler. The case settled after 5 days, but the victory was won because we showed up, because we were there. Finally, I'd like to speak to my brother and sister lawyers. Ralph once said, our rights under tort law are constantly being eroded. We're always on the defense. We're constantly backing up. We save a little here, we save a little there, we win a battle, but we never get anything back. And it is time for us to take the offensive. We need to turn the table. We need to tilt it in the other direction. There are so many ways to do this. I find, to my amazement, as Ralph mentioned, lawyers are afraid of the press. Oh, we can't control these guys. They don't like us. They'll hurt us. They'll say bad things about all this garbage. No, do you know how starving journalists are for good stories? They went into journalism so that they could do good stories. Most of them have great hearts and spirits, and if you bring them in early and you tell them about your case, they follow the case. You take video depositions of all the bad guys, you edit them and play them in opening statement, you play them in your case in chief. Before the defense lawyer gets up there, the case is over. When you win, you call a news conference. You put your client front and center. You talk about the importance of the jury system, and you let your client be the star of the show. Corporations hate, like all bureaucrats, they hate bad publicity. The one emotion they're capable of is embarrassment. You can embarrass them when you have a good case. Never hesitate to do it. Then give the depositions, give the videos, give your good stuff to the stations. They'll run it, and you put it on the web, and it stays there. That's how you magnify the power of the tort system. We try to visit schools when we can, and we tell the kids, as young as 8th grade, they say, if you were to go on a soapbox at the steps of the legislature and start denouncing the governor, if the governor told the state police to get you out of there and you said, I know my rights, and they put you in handcuffs and haul you away for a day, you can sue the governor. You know that, kids? You can file a lawsuit, and the governor has to answer. And if he doesn't answer, he loses the case. And he has to show up in front of a jury just like anybody else and defend himself. That's how powerful this system is. That's what it means to have rights. He can't just call somebody or order somebody and make it go away like they do everywhere else in the world. And when you speak to jurors, talk to them about what it's like to bring a case. Do you know, when you bring a case, that your life is an open book? Do you know how much of your life is out there in electrons? How much people can learn about you just from the internet? Do you use email? Do you have Facebook? Do you do Twitter? Think about all the stuff about about you that's there. Think about what's in your medical records, your psychological records, your employment records, your school records. Imagine some serious professionals digging through all of it, trying to find something in it to make you look bad. That's what happens when you file a lawsuit against a large institution. This is serious business. Do you really think anybody goes into this frivolously? Well, when they learn from you that the Greeks invented the jury system. They used to have 1,800 people gather for a trial, the people who invented democracy. When the barons of England brought bad King John to heel because he was so abusive, they made him sign the Universal Declaration of the Rights of Man, the Magna Carta. Number 2 was a right to a jury trial. And they fought for 1,000 years to take it away from us, and a lot of times they win and we drag it back. And as has been said, when the states wouldn't sign up to the Articles of Confederation and they demanded a Bill of Rights, the right to a jury trial in civil matters where more than $20 is at stake is in there. That's how important it is. Men have died face down in the mud for your right to sit in this box. You today are the conscience of the community. You represent all the community. You speak for them. You set the standard for what we will accept and what we will not accept. And when you retire to that jury room, think of the honor of being where you are. Make yourselves proud. Thank you.